Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Chapter number 7. Annuities. Annuities. जी, इंट्रोडक्शन. इन अवर सोसाइटी, हमारी सोसाइटी में वी सी अराउंड अस दैट लिविंग स्टैंडर्ड्स ऑफ पीपल वेरीज फ्रॉम एरिया टू एरिया. जी, वंस अगेन वी सी अराउंड अस, हम अपने दाएं बाएं इर्द गिर्द देखते हैं, that living standards of people varies from areas to areas. That is, some of people are very rich. भाई कुछ लोग बहुत अमीर होते हैं. Some are rich, कुछ अमीर होते हैं. But most of the people are poor. लेकिन अक्सरियत जो ना गरीब होते हैं. The rich and the clever people always try to make their money more and more through different sources. Especially they used those sources in which risk factor is almost zero. but जिसमें risk factor zero का वो वाला वो यूज करते हैं. These risk free sources are banks, ये banks हैं जी, national saving centers हैं जी, private companies etc. Therefore these people deposit a lump sum amount of money at a particular rate of interest and get a double or triple amount of money after a fixed period. But many people are not in a position to deposit a lump sum amount at present for getting a big amount in future. These natural question arises that how can they get a large amount in future. जी, तो जरा देखिएगा, यहाँ पे जो डिस्कशन हो रही है, कुछ लोगों के पास पैसे होते हैं ज़्यादा, वो बैंक्स में जमा करा देते हैं और उनको एक लम सम अमाउंट जो है ना आ जाती है. लेकिन हर बंदा इस पोजीशन में नहीं होता कि वो उसके पास हैवी अमाउंट हो और वो वहाँ पे जमा करा दे. टू ओवरकम दिस सिचुएशन पीपल नॉर्मली सेव और डिपॉजिट स्मॉल अमाउंट ऑफ मनी रेगुलरली फॉर सम पीरियड्स. जी, तो कुछ लोग क्या होते हैं, टू ओवरकम दिस सिचुएशन, भाई इस सिचुएशन को हैंडल करने के लिए पीपल नॉर्मली सेव और डिपॉजिट स्मॉल अमाउंट ऑफ मनी रेगुलरली फॉर सम पीरियड्स. दीज पेमेंट्स और डिपॉजिट्स मे बी वीकली, मंथली, हाफ ईयरली, yearly etc. We shall study such regular deposit in details in this chapter. हम यहाँ पे इसको डिटेल में डिस्कस करेंगे जी. Annuity. The word annuity is derived from Latin word annuities, which means after fixed time. Therefore, we can define annuity as a sequence of payment of equal amount made at equal intervals of time is called annuity. By a sequence of payment, by a sequence of payments of equal amount made at equal intervals of time is called an annuity. By a sequence of payment of equal amount made at equal intervals of time is called an annuity. Once again, the word annuity is derived from Latin word annuity and annuitas, which means after fixed time. Therefore, we can define annuity as a sequence of payments of equal amount made at equal intervals of time is called an annuity. The interval may be weekly, monthly, semi-annually, annually, etc. In short, we can say that by a sequence of payment of equal amount made at equal intervals of time is called an annuity. G. An annuity is a series of periodic payments. By an annuity is a series of periodic का मतलब जिसमें इक्वल वक्फे हों जी, जैसे एक एक हफ्ते बाद, 15 दिन बाद, महीने बाद. तो क्या है, एन एन्युटी इज अ सीरीज ऑफ periodic payments भाई an annuity is a series of periodic payments. A payment interval, the time period between two successive installments of an annuity is called payment interval. It is also called payment period. It is also called payment period. The time period between two successive installments. The time period between two successive installments of an annuity is called payment intervals. It is also called पेमेंट पीरियड. भाई इसको पेमेंट पीरियड भी बोल सकते हैं जी. भाई दो इंस्टॉलमेंट के दरमियान जो रेगुलर वो वक्फा होगा उसको क्या बोलते हैं? पेमेंट इंटरवल. द टाइम पीरियड बिटवीन टू सक्सेसिव installment. The time period between two successive installments is called an annuity. It is called payment intervals. It is also called payment period. Time of annuity. By time of annuity, the time period between first and the last installment of an annuity is called term of annuity. The time period between first and last installment. The time period between first and last installment of an annuity is called a term of annuity. Again, annuitant, a person who receives the payments of annuity is called annuitant. By a person who receives the payments of an annuity, a person who receives the payments of an annuity is called annuitant. For example, suppose Ahmad is to pay rupees 20 monthly installment of rupees 500 to Waris. G. Suppose Ahmad is to pay 20 monthly installments of rupees 500 to Waris. Thus, in this annuity, installment is of rupees 500. Payment period is 1 month, or term of annuity is 20 months. Waris is the annuitant. By Waris is annuitant. By types of annuity. By types of annuity. By the types of annuity, there are three types of annuities. Number one, annuity ordinary. दूसरा annuity due. तीसरा annuity perpetual या perpetuity. जी, there are annual, annuity ordinary, annuity due, annuity perpetual या परपेचुअलिटी. जी, एनुटी के 3 होते हैं जी, एक ऑर्डिनरी, एक ड्यू और एक प्रीपेचुएटी. अब एनुटी ऑर्डिनरी. जी, एन एनुटी इज सेड टू बी एनुटी ऑर्डिनरी if payments are made at the end of the intervals. It is also called annuity immediate. For example, profit gain from bank at the end of each period. Salary of employee is paid at the end of the month. Daily wages of a person is paid at the end of the day, etc. By annuity ordinary. Once again, an annuity is said to be annuity ordinary if payments are made at the end of the intervals या at the end of the period. भाई जब एंड पे जो पेमेंट की जाती हैं at the end of the time is called annuity immediate या ordinary annuity. मतलब for example, for profit gain from bank at the end of each period. Salary of an employee is paid at the end of month. Daily wages of a person is said to be at the end of the day. अब एनुटी ड्यू जी, अगला है एनुटी ड्यू जी. An annuity is said to be annuity due if payments are made at the beginning of the intervals. By at the beginning of the intervals. G. Annuity due. An annuity is said to be annuity due if payments are made at the beginning of the intervals या beginning of the period. जी, जब आप एडवांस पे करते हैं ना तो उसको बोलते हैं एन्युटी ड्यू. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मंथली रेंट हाउस पेड इन एडवांस. मंथली रेंट ऑफ ए हाउस पेड इन एडवांस. जी, आपने मंथली रेंट ऑफ ए हाउस पेड इन एडवांस. जी, ट्यूशन फी या ड्यूज पेड इन एडवांस इन schools or colleges, etc. By tuition fee या dues paid in advance in schools or colleges, etc. Amount of an annuity. The amount or sum of annuity is the total of all payments at the end of the annuity. It is also called future amount of the annuity and is noted by S. Now we develop a formula to find sum of annuity. G. Now we develop formula to find sum of the annuity by amount of an annuity. The amount or sum of the annuity is the total of all payments at the end of the annuity. It is also called future amount of the annuity and is denoted by S. और भाईजान उसको क्या बोलना जी,